I was mute and silent. I held my peace, but to no avail, and my distress grew worse. My heart became hot within me. As I mused, the fire burned. Then I spoke with my tongue. Now, those are the words of David, but they no doubt reflect the anguish in Job's silence leading up to his first speech here in Job 3. 3 of Job's friends arrived to comfort him at the end of Job 2. But when they saw that Job's pain was very great, they did not speak a word to him. We are certain that they came with maybe some well-prepared statements, some ideas about what they would say to comfort him, to bring him some sort of solace in the midst of all of his loss. But when they saw that his pain was very great, they did not have anything to say. They just sat with him for 7 days on the ground. During those 7 days, Job's distress only seemed to grow worse. His heart became hot within him. As he dwelt on his great suffering, the fire burned within, and then he broke his silence in Job 3. Look at Job 3, verse 1. Afterward, Job opened his mouth and cursed the day of his birth, then dropped down to Job 3:11. Why did I not die at birth, Job asked, come forth from the womb and expire? And then drop down to Job 3:20. Why is life given to him who suffers? A life, and life to the bitter of soul. Pray with me. Father, as we continue to consider Job's grief, his suffering, his deep discouragement, in light of, Father, what you allowed him to go through, what you allowed to come his way, Father, I pray that we would learn something about our own deep discouragement. I pray that we would find in Job a fellow struggler, one who has walked the path of suffering, one who can be an example to us. Father, one through whom you teach us about your goodness, about your grace, your overcoming grace. Father, help us now as we study your word to be consoled, to be comforted, even if we are suffering, even if we are in grief, even if we are deeply discouraged ourselves. We pray in the name of Jesus. Amen. Job was an exceptional man who suffered exceptionally. Even though he was the greatest man of the East, the greatest man on earth, God said, he was an innocent, upright, reverent, holy man. He still lost almost everything. All his wealth, every one of his 10 children, all his strength, all seemed to be snatched away in what must have seemed to him, it must have seemed like a moment's notice, a moment's time. This was an exceptional suffering, and this exceptional man, at least initially, he responded rather exceptionally. You remember in Job 121 that he said, naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked I shall return. The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. An incredible response to all that he had lost at that time. In Job 2:10, Job asked the question. He said, shall we indeed accept good from God and not accept adversity? And then we have the word of God that says, and in all of this, Job did not sin with his lips. But this does not mean, these responses do not mean that Job was okay, you understand. That he was okay with all that had taken place. No, Job was crushed. And in Job 3, we hear just how crushed Job was. In this chapter, Job laments the day of his birth. He wishes that he had been stillborn, and he longs for death. And when we hear Job's words in Job 3, I think that makes more sense to us. That Job would feel these ways in light of all that he has lost. Suffering is as common to our human experience as breathing. Don't you know that? If you've lived long enough, you have suffered. You have lost someone that you love. You have lost something. You have gone through a trial, a hardship. Suffering is as common to us as is breathing. As one of Job's friends will later say, man is born for trouble as sparks fly upward. In other words, it's just a part of life. It's just a part of the way things are. Perhaps at times this trouble has made us wish that we had never been born. Have you ever been there? Perhaps it's even made us long to die. Now, we don't say it like that. We wouldn't say as Christians, oh, I wish I was dead. But have you ever said, I just wish I could go on to heaven? I just wish I could go on to be with the Lord? If so, we find the poetic lament of a fellow sufferer in Job 3. In this chapter, Job expresses our sorrow. He asks our agonized questions, and he commiserates with us in our misery. But Job's experience also teaches us a few lessons about the deep depression that comes with our suffering. Let's look at Job cursing the day of his birth. Look at Job 3, 1 through 10. Afterward, Job opened his mouth and he cursed the day of his birth. And Job said, "Let the day perish on which I was to be born, and the night which said, a boy is conceived. May that day be darkness. Let not God above care for it, nor light shine on it. Let darkness and black gloom claim it. Let a cloud settle on it. Let the blackness of the day terrify it. As for that night, let darkness seize it. Let it not rejoice among the days of the year. Let it not come into the number of the months. Behold, let that night be barren. Let no joyful shout enter it. Let those curse it who curse the day, who are prepared to rouse Leviathan. Let the stars of its twilight be darkened. Let it wait for light but have none. And let it not see the breaking dawn, because it did not shut the opening of my mother's womb, or hide trouble from my eyes." After sitting in silence with his friends nearby for a week, Job opened his mouth to curse the day of his birth. This means that Job held his birthday in contempt. In verse 3, he wanted that day to perish. He wanted it to be destroyed along with the night of his conception. In verses 4 through 5, concerning the day of his birth, he wanted it to be a day in which the sun never came up, a day swallowed by darkness, a day forsaken by God. In verses 6 and 7, concerning the night of his conception, he wanted it to be seized by darkness. He wanted it erased from history's calendar. He wanted it to be a night of barrenness rather than a night of joyful, fruitful conception. In verse 8, Job wants those who have made curses their profession. Someone like Balaam, who you'll remember in Numbers 22 through 24, was paid to curse the people of God. He wants someone like that to curse the day of his birth. He imagines some professional curser being able to curse the day of his birth to such an extent that Leviathan is raised up. That Leviathan, the mythical sea monster who is able to swallow great big objects, maybe someone can call him forth, Job thinks, and he can swallow the day of my birth, the night of my conception. In verse 9, he wants the day of his birth to be a day that never dawned. And in verse 10, he tells us why. "Curse that day for failing to shut my mother's womb, for letting me be born to see all this trouble." Rather than feel all the pain and the anguish of his present suffering, Job wishes that he had never been conceived, that he had never been born. But Job can curse the night of his conception and the day of his birth all he wants. The fact is that he was conceived and he was born. And so Job realizes this, and then in verses 11 through 19, Job wishes that he had been born stillborn, that he had been born dead. Look at Job 3, 11 through 19. "Why did I not die at birth, come forth from the womb and expire? Why did the knees receive me, and why the breast that I should suck? For now I would have lain down and been quiet. I would have slept then. I would have been at rest with kings and with counselors of the earth who rebuilt ruins for themselves, or with princes who had gold, who were filling their houses with silver, or like a miscarriage which is discarded, I would not be, as infants that never saw light. There the wicked cease from raging, and there the weary are at rest. The prisoners are at ease together. They do not hear the voice of the taskmaster. The small and the great are there, and the slave is free from his master." Now Job laments that he did not die at birth. He first cursed the day of his birth, and now he laments that he was not dead when he was brought forth from his mother's womb. In verse 11, the King James very poetically has Job asking, "Why did I not give up the ghost when I came out of the belly?" This is the question that Job is asking in his anguish. Job is wishing that he had been stillborn at birth. Job repeats this wish in verse 16. The New American Standard is graphic. Job wishes that he had been a discarded miscarriage. Most other translations have Job wishing that he was a stillborn baby, quickly hidden in the grave, never to see the light of life. Having been born and conceived, Job wishes that he had been born dead, and he tells us why. If he had been born dead, he would have lain down, been quiet, slept, been at rest. All of that in verse 3. What is Job looking for? He's looking for rest. Rest from his anguish. Rest from his trouble. If he had been born dead, Job would be resting with the great men of the earth, kings, princes, and counselors. You'll see that in verses 14 and 15. All these great men built monuments for themselves. They hoarded gold and filled storehouses with silver. But like Job, in death, they had lost it all. They had lost it all. They couldn't take any of it with them. When death came calling for them, the monuments, the gold and silver were lost. But at least they were at rest, because they were what? They were dead. But you see, Job has lost it all. And he's still made to live in his suffering. He longs to be where they are, so he can experience the rest that they experienced. If Job had been born dead, he would be in that place where the wicked, like the Sabians and the Chaldeans, who had attacked his children and taken his property, where the wicked don't rage, where the weary, like Job, are at rest. You see it in verse 17. If Job had been born dead, he would be in that place where all are equal, he says in verses 18 and 19. In death, there really aren't prisoners or taskmasters, small or great, slaves or masters. As Job sees it, in death, all are equal, all are at rest, and that is what Job wants. But at present, you understand, Job is a prisoner. Job is a prisoner of his grief. Job is suffering under the hand of his taskmaster, and his taskmaster is his anguish. He is a small man struck down by the greatness of his turmoil. He is a slave of anguish, and tribulation is his master. And Job longs for freedom. He wants to be dead so he can be at rest, so he can be free of all this pain and suffering. But Job wasn't born dead. So in verses 20 through 26, Job longs for death. And I understand he does what? He curses the day of his birth, but he was born. And so he wishes that he had been stillborn, but he wasn't stillborn. He lived. He's lived to experience all of this pain and suffering. And so in verses 20 through 26, he wants to die now. He longs for death. Why is life given to him who suffers, and life to the bitter of soul, who long for death, but there is none, and dig for it more than for hidden treasures, who rejoice greatly and exult when they find the grave? Why is life given to a man whose way is hidden, and whom God has hedged in? For my groaning comes at the sight of my food, and my cries pour out like water. For what I fear comes upon me, and what I dread befalls me. I am not at ease, nor am I quiet, and I am not at rest, but turmoil comes. In verse 20, light is a symbol for life. Job wonders why the light of life would be given to someone like him, someone destined for a miserable and bitter existence. Lord, why did you bring me into this world if you just wanted me to suffer like this? Why did you bring me into this world if I'm just supposed to be in this anguish, this agony for the rest of my life? In verses 21 and 22, he wonders why long life would be given to someone who longs for death, to someone who searches for it like treasure and rejoices when they find it in the grave. He wonders in verse 23 why life is given to someone whose way is hidden. That is, to someone who seems to have no future, no path forward in life. He wonders why life is given to someone who is, as he says, hedged in by God. Recall back in Job 1 that Satan asked God this question: does Job revere you for no reason? Have you not made a hedge about him? That hedge of protection now feels to Job like a hedge of persecution. He feels trapped in this misery, and death is the only escape that he sees. Job is a man in deepest despair. He is a man who despairs of life itself. His food and drink in verse 24 are groaning and tears. His worst fears have become his daily reality, he says in verse 25. He has no ease, no quietness, no rest. His anxiety grows as he fears what? There may be more turmoil to come in verse 26. And brothers and sisters, let me tell you, there is more turmoil to come for Job. For Job. We'll see it. Job is thoroughly discouraged. Thoroughly discouraged. Martin Luther once told a parable about Satan's demons reporting on their sinister work of trying to destroy men's souls. One demon came before Satan and he said, well, Good news. There was a company of Christians crossing the desert, and I loosed lions upon them. Soon the sands of the desert were strewn with their mangled corpses. Isn't that what you want, boss? But Satan shouted, what good is that? The lions destroyed their bodies, but their souls were saved. It's their souls that I'm after. Another demon stepped forward to give his report to Satan. Well, there was a company of Christian pilgrims sailing through the sea on a vessel, and I sent a great wind which drove the ship on the rocks, and every Christian on board was drowned. Isn't that good news, boss? And once again, Satan shouted, what good is that? Their bodies were drowned in the sea, but their souls were still saved. It's their souls that I'm after. And a third demon then gave his report. He said, well, for 10 years I've been trying to cast one particular Christian into a deep despair and depression, and at last I have succeeded. And with that report, Satan and his demons erupted in shouts of triumph because the soul of a believer had been defeated, or at least that's what they thought. Many Christians have gone through dark nights of the soul, a period in life in which God seems distant, evil seems close, hope seems lost, and death looks more attractive than living. Let me ask you, have you ever been there? Have you ever been in a dark night of the soul, a period in life when God seems distant, when evil seems close, when hope seems lost, and death looks more attractive than living? I know we're not supposed to admit to things like this in church where we pretend like we got it all together. When we pretend like everything is perfect and we're always just moving through every trial and tribulation with perfect faithfulness. But I think we've all been there. If we're being honest, we've all been in a dark night of the soul where, again, God seems distant. He seems hidden from us. Evil seems close at hand. Hope seems lost to us. And death looks more attractive than living. What can we learn about our own dark nights of the soul from Job's dark night of the soul here? Lesson number 1. Even the best of us can become deeply discouraged. Even the best of us can become deeply discouraged. Job was the best of us. Job was a great man, the greatest man of the East, Job chapter 1 said, the greatest man on earth according to God in Job chapter 2, and yet to say that Job became deeply discouraged is an understatement. Job is in the depths of despair. Even the best of us can become deeply discouraged. David was another great man who became deeply discouraged. In Psalm 69, 2 and 3, David wrote, I have sunk in deep mire. Have you ever felt like that? That you've sunk in deep mire? He said, I have sunk in deep mire, and there is no foothold. I can't get out of this mire. I have come into deep waters, and a flood overflows me. I am weary with my crying. My throat is parched. My eyes fail while I wait for my God. Have you ever been in despair like that? Have you ever felt what David writes in Psalm 69, 2 and 3? And brothers and sisters, I hope you haven't. I hope you've never been in despair like that, but life being what it is, I believe that most of us have been in the mire like David describes. The Apostle Paul was also deeply discouraged. In 2 Corinthians 1, 8 and 9, Paul wrote, for we do not want you to be unaware, brethren, of our affliction which came to us in Asia. Listen to what he says. That we were burdened excessively beyond our strength, so that we despaired even of life. Indeed, we had the sentence of death written within ourselves. We had the sentence of death within ourselves. Now the Apostle Paul was who? He was the Apostle Paul. He had seen the risen Jesus, and yet he knew what it was to be in the depths of despair. He knew what it was to carry around within him the sentence of death. Martin Luther wrote about an episode of deep discouragement in his life, saying, for more than a week I was close to the gates of death and hell. I trembled in all my members. Christ was wholly lost to me. I was shaken by desperation. Perhaps you've been there. Perhaps you've been in that place where you felt close to death, trembling in all your members, shaking with desperation, Jesus somehow seemingly lost to you. Perhaps you're there now. If so, the Word of God reminds you this morning that you are not alone. Job was there. David was there. The Apostle Paul was there. Martin Luther, the father of the Protestant Reformation, was there. Brothers and sisters, I have been there. Many of you would admit to have been there also. We are not alone in our despair, in our discouragement, in our grief, and in our suffering. So many other believers have been there, and just as God saw them through the darkness, He will see you through your darkness as well. He will not let your soul be lost. Lesson number 2. Even the best of us can be deeply discouraged on multiple levels simultaneously. Job suffered physically from the boils that covered his body. He could not eat or sleep given the trauma that he experienced. And as Job ached with deep discouragement in the body, his mind was also plagued with deep discouragement of unanswered questions like those we see in Job 3:11 and 12. Look at what he writes there. Why did I not die at birth, come forth from the womb and expire? Why did the knees receive me, and why the breast that I should suck? Drop down to 3:20 and 23, 3:20 through 23. Why is light given to him who suffers, and life to the bitter of soul, who long for death, but there is none, and dig for it more than for hidden treasures, who rejoice greatly and exult when they find the grave? Why is life given, or light given to a man whose way is hidden and whom God has hedged in? Do you know what the answer is that Job receives to all of those questions? No answer. No answer is ever given to these questions. Job's friends will try to say some stuff, but God never answers any of these questions. Job is plagued in the body. Job is plagued in the mind. But Job is also deeply discouraged in the heart. His heart was broken. His heart felt no peace, no rest. He longed for death because in death he thought his body, mind, and heart would find the peace and rest he was starving for. But not only was Job plagued in the body and in the mind and the heart, Job was also bruised in his soul. While his body was covered with ulcerous boils, while his mind raced with unanswerable questions, while his heart longed for peace and rest, Job's soul had been deeply bruised. Now, some say that in Job chapter 3 that Job is not talking to anyone in particular, that he's just talking to the wind. Others might say that because Job's friends are likely within earshot as Job begins this lament in Job 3, they've been sitting with him in silence for a week, that they overhear this. And so Job may have been saying all of this in Job 3 really to them, like, answer these things for me, fellas. But in reality, I think Job is talking to who? He's talking to God. He's talking to God. Seems obvious to me that he's talking to God. In this chapter, God is the only one who knows what Job longs to know. Job is asking questions that only God can answer. In this chapter, God is the only one who can provide what Job thinks he needs. Can his friends provide him this peace? Can his friends provide him this rest? No. His friends can't answer these questions. His friends can't provide him this peace and rest. In this chapter, Job knows that if he has been hedged in by pain and suffering, he has not been hedged in by the wind. He has not been hedged in by his friends. He's been hedged in by who? By God. Job's soul has not suffered a fatal blow, but it is deeply bruised. It is deeply discouraged. He has yet to curse God and die. He has not done that. But brothers and sisters, he walks up to the line. He walks up to the edge. Have you ever walked up to that line? Have you ever walked up to the edge? Have you ever been hurting in your body, your mind, your heart, and your soul all at the same time? Have you ever had aches that wouldn't stop, anxieties that wouldn't ease up, grief that wouldn't dissipate, darkness that would not live? If so, you're in good company. Job, a great man of God, was in that same place. And by the end of this book, you'll see that God carried him through. He will carry you through the darkness as well. No matter how the pain stacks up on you, God will not let your soul be lost. Third lesson, even the best of us can lose perspective in our deep discouragement. Even the best of us can lose perspective in our deep discouragement. When we lose perspective, we begin to develop a distorted view of God and a distorted view of ourselves. We might think things like this when we are deeply discouraged. God doesn't love me. God is against me. If He loved me, I wouldn't be going through this. If He loved me, He would explain all of this to me. It would be better if I had never been born. It would be better if I were dead. Now, Job was thinking that way, wasn't he? Have you ever thought that distorted way in your deep discouragement? The truth is, no matter what you're going through, God is love. And because you are His, He loves you. And whatever He is allowed to come into your life is somehow an expression of His love for you. Now, you may walk up to me after the service and you may say, Rocky, how is this that I went through 10 years ago? Or how is this that I'm going through now? Or how is this that I went through as a child? How is all of that an expression of His love for me? And I will say to you, I do not know. But I know that God is love. And I know that He loves you. And I know that He has promised to work whatever has come into your life for your good and His glory. So it is somehow, some way, an expression of His love for you. Maybe one day in eternity we will understand. Maybe we will not. But we must always be content to let God be God. We must always be content to let God be God. God gave you life. And even if you feel like dying, He will bring you back. Job's suffering was excruciating in his heart. I think Job was very close to asking, my God, why have you forsaken me? But can Job imagine a resurrection from this agony? I think at this moment, it doesn't seem that Job can. But later Job will say this in Job 19:25 and 26. I know that my Redeemer lives, and that in the end He will stand upon the earth, and after my skin has been destroyed, yet in my flesh I will see God. Job feels like dying, but his trust is in a Redeemer who is the resurrection and the life. What does he say? Though my skin is destroyed, yet I will see God in my flesh. In other words, Job knows that a resurrection is coming. One day, the same Jesus who died on the cross and rose from the dead to redeem us from the penalty and power of sin, He will come and He will stand upon the earth and He will redeem us from even the shadow of death. He will wipe away every tear. There will be no death any longer. There will no longer be any mourning or crying or pain. All of this in Revelation 21. In the resurrection, Jesus will make all things new. You may be thinking right now, through what you're going through, when the grief, the trials, the pain, the suffering, the hardships, the tribulation, when all of it is just overwhelming you, you may be asking from time to time, my God, why have you forsaken me? But brothers and sisters, thanks to the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ, we know, better than Job knew, that there is a resurrection coming.